Well, Happy New Year and welcome to Hope in the Light of Suicide. Happy New Year, my co host.
Happy New Year to you too. Happy New Year, everyone.
Oh boy. Um, yeah, a new year. I was just before we came on, there's a saying that I came across a while back, new life, no directions.
New life, no directions.
I was actually going to have that tattooed on my arm.
What does that mean to you?
To me, well, I mean, kind of like, well, somebody asked me about, what's your resolutions for the new year? And I never really make any because, number one, nobody ever follows through with them, including me. But new life, no direction, it kind of came about when, after losing my husband to suicide, I kind of had a plan as for what the latter part of our lives were going to kind of follow.
Mm-hmm.
He was getting ready for retirement. And then all of a sudden, poof, within a 2-hour span, not by my choice, I was thrust into a new life that I knew nothing about how to navigate. I don't know. It was, and I came across this saying, "New life, no directions," is because people try and give you advice on how you should be navigating your life, and it may be okay for them, but not for you. And you can't do anything. You really can't do that just to appease them. Mm-hmm. It's hard enough for our lives. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know that. Especially after losing Patrick.
Yeah, I found, what you said to be absolutely true, and that, well-meaning people who, approach you and their intention is to console you after a loss. You hear the usual things, I'm sorry for your loss. They're in a better place. It was God's plan. You'll get through this. Things get better with time. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one that used to stick with me the most. Things will get better with time. And, I find myself, I don't know that I would necessarily 100, I don't 100% subscribe to the things get better with time. What I do get, subscribe to is over time, things become, I don't know whether you want to say numb to them. I got some good news the other day, and one of my coworkers, I was on the phone, and I was sitting in my office, and I was talking about this good news, and she could hear me on the phone, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's just after Christmas, and I feel like I'm getting Christmas all over again. And she looked at me and she said, she made the comment, it's about time you got some good news, because you have, it's like you've had so much negative happen in your life. And I realized I was smiling. Mm-hmm. And in that moment where, I almost felt, quote unquote, normal, at the same time, I'm like, I am really smiling. But then I almost felt guilty about smiling, because it's like, what, I think for me, when I think of the no direction piece, and I'd never heard that that quote before, but as I think about it, no direction, it is very fitting for, people who have experienced loss, I think, because, like you said, here, our lives are on this path. I mean, I pictured, 5 years from now being retired, I I wake up every morning and I expect to see, Patrick coming out of his room. Instead, I'm seeing my grandson come out of his room. I wondered, what it was going to be like, for Patrick to be able to see his son, go to middle school next year.
Right.
His oldest boy go to middle school next year. What it was going to be like, decades from now, 20, 25, 30 years from now, watching his daughter get married, but then, understanding he will never know his daughter, or he saw her as a baby. And so, forging this new direction, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, you don't know. And it's, especially for lost survivors, your path it's going to be different for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a path that you didn't ask to go down. And there are no directions. You can't, there's no one way to go through it.
When I hear us say things like, I did not ask for this.
Of course, there's a lot of things we don't ask for that we get.
That's true. But when it comes to loss, and losses that we and others like us have experienced, and I don't know about you guys out,
But it's not just suicide loss either. I mean, especially traumatic loss.
Correct.
Any traumatic loss.
I don't know about anybody else, but sometimes I feel a sense of, where am I in that grief process? When I hear myself like, I didn't ask for this. This is not my choice. I almost sometimes get the feeling that where I'm navigating through, my grief and the fact that, Patrick, and Aiden are not here anymore, I also wonder if subconsciously I'm blaming them for their own respective deaths.
I think for a while we tend to do that.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I hope it's not something that is always there. I have found myself, at first, it's natural.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to blame them for what happened. It's just natural. But again, with time and going through the grieving process and the different layers of it, and reflecting on, say, for me, the last few years of my husband's life, and taking into account, a lot of things that blame becomes a lot less. There are days that I do get angry and upset for what happened. But now, most of the time, it's, he had multiple sclerosis for 25 years. Mm-hmm. Although, unless you had known him for a really long time, for the most part, you wouldn't have been able to tell. Mm-hmm. Alcohol became a big issue towards the end of his life, with the help of others. And I think with MS, it's, and for the fact that he had it for 25 years, it's a disease that you're never going to get better from. It's just going to get worse and worse. And I think that we think, our family, that is what was happening to him. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want to be a burden. But then my argument to him is, we knew this when I married you. Mm-hmm. When I married you, you had MS. Mm-hmm. And you weren't going to be a burden to me. Mm-hmm. But I think guys look at it differently too. Their physical health and what they can and cannot do, or may not be able to do in the future?
And I wonder, I don't know that I necessarily make it gender specific, except for I do agree with, being it might be being a little sexist and stereotypical here. But, a male thing, I don't want to be a burden on my wife. I don't want to be a burden on the family. I don't want to be, like with Patrick, I don't like feeling like I feel.
Right.
And feeling helpless, I think, I would say not so much helpless for him, more the hopelessness. There were no aids for him to, again, a lot of his depression surrounded not being able to see his two younger children.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think his hands tied over, having a relationship with his middle child, and then suddenly that was taken away from him. And then, not really being able to be a part of his daughter's life. And, and I remember how many times I've heard him say, I just want my babies. I just want to see my babies. I really, and even now, Devin, when I hear Devin, I really miss my little brother. I really, and I, it tears me up inside, to watch, what he's going through. And then on top of that, still grappling with, I miss my little brother. I miss my dad.
Mm-hmm. And he's at that sensitive age that you really need to, anybody does who has children at that age who has experienced what he's experiencing, they are really vulnerable to depression.
Mm-hmm.
They are, even though may not like to say it out loud, are at high risk for suicide.
Well, with Devin, what I get from him a lot is he's selective on who he will talk to or who he's comfortable talking about his dad to. If it's family, it's fine. If it's his friends, that's not fine.
Well, he's experienced not good things with.
Well, yeah, there is that.
And kids, and it's not just kids, but I'd say most people in general who have not experienced what he has at such a young age, or even what we're experiencing. I see it in talking to people that unless they've experienced it, they don't understand it, and most often don't want to.
Yeah, it's a process. It's for me, being in the field, I find myself grappling with, okay, let me, almost like have to have an out of body type of experience.
Right.
Let me take a step back and approach this. And with Pat, that's like one of the things that I've struggled with, because he wouldn't let me find someone else for him to talk to. He
Right.
insisted that the only person he needed to talk to was me, his mom. I'm like, I can't be your therapist, son. But I also knew I couldn't force him into
Right.
treatment. But when I think of going back to the quote that you put, new life, no direction. I found through the holidays repeating traditions from before he was gone, he was left. Like, for instance, I his nickname was my little monkey. So anytime I see something that, a monkey theme or was a monkey, I would purchase it. And I remember going into a store and, this huge display, and right on the top shelf of the display were, these monkeys with Curious George. I think, like, oh my God, gotta have this monkey. So, I purchased it, and then, as I'm, shopping for the other kids, children, for this monkey game, Going Bananas, I think it was called, or something like that. So I get to purchase it. And then I'm looking, and I'm like, wait a minute. He's not here for me to give these to. So it's almost like this creation of this, I don't want to say a shrine, because I don't want to create the illusion that, there's a shrine in my house,
Right.
dedicated to my son. But I also found, and I don't know if we sent it in or not, there was a photo that popped up on my social media timeline of myself and Aiden.
I didn't get that one in this week.
And
Now it's such a cute picture.
yeah, I mean, we'll get it next
weekend.
year or next week. But I found myself processing as I'm looking at this picture. One, the fact that it would pop up, because it's almost, I don't want to say eerie, because I don't scare easy, and I kind of, I say more coincidental. A lot of memories that are popping up are either Aiden or Pat, and I'm like, you guys are talking to me, aren't you?
Mm-hmm.
You guys are talking to me. But, the picture of Aiden, if I'm not mistaken, may have been the last picture I ever took of him.
Oh, really?
Yes. Last picture I ever took of him. And, I've found myself, again, as I'm, into this next new year without, the both of them. I remember, posting something to, his other grandma's page. I wish I had more memories. Or maybe I posted it to my own. I wish I had more memories. If only I'd known that moving to Florida would mean, and I just, dot.
Mm-hmm.
Just left it at that. So where do we go from here? Like, what, how do you, and I think that's the challenge for some people. How do you navigate new normals, new years, time-honored traditions, with a part of you missing.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. Like, for me, pretty much everything has changed, but like with the holidays, Christmas Eve, we'd always go either to my mother-in-law's house, and then when she passed away, our nephew, his family took it over. So we would do that, and then Christmas Day would be dinner either at mother-in-law's house or my sister-in-law's house. And of course, after Bobby passed away, now I do every other Christmas here in Florida with our family here, which my husband's family is all here, and my family's all out in Washington and Oregon, so every other year now I'll go out to Washington. So this was my year to have Christmas in Florida, which was a good thing, especially with COVID, because I wouldn't have been able to travel anyways. But I didn't go to my nephew's Christmas Eve. I felt there was too many people, going to be there. I mean, that was just my own, for me. Come to find out, I was the only one that wasn't there. But we did have I did have Christmas dinner with my sister-in-laws and one of my brother-in-laws and nephew, and we had a good time. But one tradition that Bobby and I have done since the very beginning is New Year's Eve. We just spend it at home by ourselves. We have never gone out. Actually, the very first New Year's we spent together was with my grandma, because it was not long after I lost my first husband. But even last year when I was out in Washington, I was back home in Florida before the new year, so I could just spend New Year's at home. And that's what I did again. And it's not, I'd say, as bad as it was the first couple years, because I think it's just, I know that that's just what we did. And my mom was worried this year that I was alone or by myself too much. But and she probably thinks I'm crazy with the way I say it, but I'm like, I'm never alone.
Right.
You know?
You're right. It's
I'm like, and then I should have just left it at that for her, but I'm like, I said, Bobby's always here.
right.
Just not in the form that I prefer him in.
Exactly. And that's what gets me, with I hear that a lot as well, he's still here, and I respond the same way. I get, I understand that he's physically not here.
Right.
And I wish that he was physically here. But I still joke about, walking around the house and, hearing something drop or seeing a shadow, and I'm like, what are you doing?
This is really weird too, because the last few weeks, the holiday weeks, I have been seeing shadows like crazy. I'll be doing something, and it wouldn't matter where I'm at, sitting at the desk for the foundation, and I've had to double take, I don't know how many times in the last few weeks. And I could see outside the window or something in the house, and I'm like, looking. That has been really elevated the last few weeks.
I have to ask myself sometimes when that happens, is it wishful thinking, or is it's him? It's him. I'd like to believe, no, it's him. I know it's him.
Yeah, me too. Because, for me, it's like, when it has happened the last few weeks, I'm concentrating on something else, and it just totally pulls me out of that. And it's just kind of like a blip. But several times I've had to oh, wait a minute, and then there's nothing there. I'm like,
Yeah, like I'll be in the middle of watching something on TV, or doing something in the laundry. You're in the laundry, doing something in the garage. You're in the garage doing laundry, and I will see the shadow pass by, and I ask myself, okay, is that one of these floaters that I have going on, or
am I going crazy now?
I think, I wonder, sometimes myself, it's like, okay, I've got a new floater going on here. But then I think, wait a minute now, that's a little too large to be a floater. Do I need to call my eye doctor and say, hey, we need to, figure out what's going on with my eyes? But, it's funny that, as I look at our purple folder here, where one of the bullet points is the willingness to laugh with others and at yourself is healing. And, I'm like, as I'm thinking of, going through, especially the holidays with, holidays often being very difficult for, people who have experienced loss. Again, I think, we talked, at our Thanksgiving, break for your show, for example, it's an empty table. Or, for Christmas and then, New Year's, it's like there's a stack of gifts that are not going to be opened, or there's a stack of gifts that are symbolically open for that person. And I remember, during, the holidays, Christmas and then, again at New Year's, a group of friends over, at the house. And the majority of these friends, knew Patrick. And we were talking about things, and we're like, well, if Patrick were here, I bet you this would be going on. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Or I wonder what Patrick would say about that. Or, or we're sitting in the back, and there's one patio chair that I have it's Patrick's chair. And I think my nephew, sat in the chair, and, I heard it, like crack. It's one of those resin chairs. It's been, it's going on 2 years now. And kind of felt this like, oh, you're in Patrick's chair. I'm not a smoker, but friends who are smokers,
Right.
and they were like, oh, what do we have? Where can we put the? Do you have a can or something we put the ashes in? I was like, oh, there's an ashtray, the patio table, and has a shelf underneath it. This is an ashtray there, and it's my baby.
Yeah.
And I was like, but that's Patrick's ashtray. And, really, looked at me, and I'm, I felt this sense of, you're touching his stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But, I told him, no, you can use the ashtray. But in my head, I'm like, but you shouldn't be using the ashtray. And I just felt myself saying, as long as when you're done, you put the ashtray back where it was. And I found myself, like, ensuring that I impressed upon them, do not empty the ashtray. Do not empty the ashtray. And, I sat back and I'm like chuckling, like, this is not, I'm going to use the word loosely, very loosely. This is really pathetic. There's cigarette butts that have been in this ashtray for, almost 2 years now. But I was like, do not empty the ashtray. Or things that are, on this shelf under this table that belonged to him. I refused to move them, refused to bring them in the house, refused to put them away. Not taking his stuff out of his closet, his clothing, some of the stuff I packed away. But I'm thinking about this as I'm chuckling and I'm laughing to myself, like, do you realize just, how idiotic you sound, And, it was part of this process of, this is really, like, you really sound like a flaming
No, but if you think about it, that's where there's no direction.
Right, exactly. And I'm like, but it's still, I sit back and then, I walk in the house and I look at him, I'm like, mother, or something, oh, do you know what your mother did today? And I think, when I think of Aiden, it's funny, Kira's like, some of the similar things, like, don't, what was it? There was something, I don't remember, there was something on her phone that someone had taken off of her phone because they thought, it would set her off, if it was there. Opposite effect.
Oh, I would
Opposite
imagine.
effect,
Well, because it wasn't her choice if someone did it, even though they had maybe the best intentions.
It was.
Yeah, I could see that.
But then, again, we find ourselves, chuckling over it, later
Right.
on, and it's, have you ever processed laughter with guilt, or you're laughing about something, or you're having a good time, and you're thinking about Bobby, and then in the midst of the laughter, you feel guilty because you're laughing?
I'm sure I've had that. I was thinking about the first time that I really had, and it didn't last as long as I hoped it would, but the first time that I really felt happy, a couple of years ago, a girlfriend of mine from high school, I hadn't seen her since we graduated a really long time ago. I met up with her and her daughter up in Jacksonville a couple of years ago. We're originally from Washington State, so the Seahawks was our team, and they were playing the Jacksonville Jaguars. And so she came down from Washington. Her daughter lives in northern Florida. Met up with her daughter, and I drove up there and spent a couple days with them, and we went to the Jaguars-Seahawks game. And ironically, we ended up running into another girl that we went to high school with, who I hadn't seen since high school either. And just had a really good time. And I remember coming back for Christmas. It was my year for Christmas here in Florida, and I was at my nephew's, and I was talking to my sister-in-law, and I told her, I said, it's like the first time I have this like happy feeling, and it felt good. It didn't last as long as I wanted it to, but I remember that so poignantly, and it was just like, and then sometimes now it's like, man, I wish I could get that feeling back. And every once in a while there's little short bursts of it, but it still doesn't seem to last as long. And one of my things, we were at our Tuesday WPBA meeting, and we were asked for what is our word for the year. And in that group, I'm a member with the foundation, and so it's much different for me than it is for other people and other businesses. But which it seems like it would be kind of obvious, but my word is hope. And what I want for this year is to be more happy than not happy, because it has been reversed for so long.
Which brings me to, one of our other, one of the, bullet points that says, wear out your questions, anger, guilt, and other feelings until you can let them go. Letting go does not mean forgetting. And I think the same is true for allowing joy and laughter, and I struggle with using the word normalcy, but normalcy, back.
Well, it's going to be a new normal, because there's no normal.
It became a new normal. I know for me, after Aiden, hearing, my oldest son, shouting the words, to me when he called me, Mom, he's gone, Aiden's dead. And I'm, what? And then, of course, fast forward, to, Haskell Sheriff. We found your son, he's deceased. What?
Yeah.
And that, it's like new normal. Like
But what is it?
Yeah, exactly. Like this, because in the midst of new normal, in our heads, we're processing, this is not normal.
No, yeah.
Parents are not supposed to bury their children.
Right.
When we get married, till death do us part, we, hold on to that. We expect to reach, old age sitting in a rocking chair,
Right. Right.
in our, I think of my grandparents, in their 90s, or later, not like this.
Well, my husband and I, we had this thing. It was kind of like an inside joke for us, because I want to live to be 100. And he was 8 years older than me. So I said, okay, if I live to be 100, you have to live to be 108 because you got to be there. He's like, okay. So that was like, okay, that's it.
That was the plan.
That was the plan, and it didn't work out that way, Yeah, I wanted to mention too, and especially with a new year, going through the different cycles of grief, and we've mentioned this many times. It's not a linear process. You go back. Do you find that, especially during the holidays, sometimes?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. And again, I'm in the field, and there are times that I have to remind myself, this is normal, and I feel sometimes that I'm right over here to acceptance, and then suddenly something will happen, and it's usually triggered by holidays, birthdays, other special events,
Significant, yeah.
that I come back and I'm right here. And I tell myself there may come a day, I don't know, that I will, we may find ourselves in that acceptance stage and stay there, and not, come back. Yeah, we still may experience those little twings and twinges that happen, around, holidays. Like I have found, like last year, with the first anniversary of both of their deaths, I had to take the day before, the day that, the anniversary day of Patrick's death, and then the day after, which is, the 12th, so the day I found out, 11th and 12th of August, I don't function, or I shouldn't say I don't function. I allow myself to shut down and not have to, I don't want to worry about work. I don't want to process, work. Valentine's Day will never be this,
No.
Maybe let me take that back. I shouldn't say never, because again, we talk about the, those absolutes, that black or white distorted thinking that we get into. Let me rephrase it this way. Valentine's Day has a completely different meaning for my family,
Right.
Now it's the day that Aiden's death. But I think you're right. We have talked about this. Is start looking, processing, or having a discussion about what each stage might look like. What you might experience in each stage. Mind you, we've said this, time and time again. It's different for everybody. What I may experience in that, denial stage, look different from you.
Right.
What I may experience when I'm hitting anger, different for you.
There's another stage. Did you know?
Which stage are you referring to?
There's another stage. It's called the 6th stage of grief. And we're doing it right now with this show.
Mm-hmm.
I read a lot. And when I, going through this process, I read a lot of books on grief and things to help make me better and make me a better person through this. And I found this book, Finding Meaning, the 6th Stage of Grief. And this was not in the plan part, A couple of years ago, a guy that I know, he's kind of like a coach, business coach. I met him prior to my husband's death, and we're going to have him on the show sometime. I was hoping sooner than later, except for he broke his leg, and I found out he hurt himself again. But he's put the seed in my head to start the fundraiser, Art for Hope. And out of that, which I came up with all by myself, was to start the foundation to help lost survivors because of the experience our family went through.
Right, right.
You know, and it's hard to get to, and it's, again, another stage of grief you don't stay in.
And I like that the book is written by David Kessler. I have, a lot of books in my library, written by him. Yeah, I think some of my textbooks, while I was in school, were written by him. I find his work fascinating.
Yeah, he's actually, when I first came across him, he was on Oprah. He was being interviewed, not on her regular show after she started her new programming. And as soon as I started listening to him, I went right on and got the book immediately. And because it's such a difficult thing to navigate through. But again, it's, so I find too, like with you, like the anniversary dates or whatever. If I do something kind of intense with the foundation, I have to take the rest of the day off or the next day off. A couple of years ago, Fridays were always really difficult days for me because that's the day that Bobby died, was on a Friday. And I found Fridays really difficult, hard to get out of bed, hard to concentrate on anything. And that's when I came across WPBA and talking to Maria, and had a meeting with her, and I said, I've got to find a different way to start my Fridays. I can't continue with this feeling every Friday. And fortunately, it was a group that gives back to the community, which is what I wanted, not just to go to some networking meeting,
Right.
And that ended up being actually the first group that I spoke publicly to about my experience with suicide. But even still, sometimes after the show, I can't concentrate on too much the rest of the day. I've tried to have even customers, and it works a little bit because I can refocus, but it is still difficult. And you still keep going back, no matter at another stage that is helpful. I mean, we're here to help other people going through what we're going through, so that you're not alone. We want people to feel comfortable to be able to talk and not feel bad about what you're feeling or what your loved one or friend did. It wasn't their fault.
Right.
And it is a really hard discussion for a lot of people to have. I had an artist that I dealt with that I represented for a little while, and he came along after my husband's death, and he knew the situation that I was in. There came a time not too long ago where I made the decision not to represent him anymore, and come to find out, he had lost his sister to suicide in over a 2-year period. He never once mentioned it. And when we parted ways, it was like, get over it. And I lost my sister, and I mean, you could tell he was angry.
Right.
He wouldn't talk about it. I'm supposed to get over it, and he was super, super angry at his sister, I guess. I don't. There wasn't enough interaction to know if he reflected some of that anger back onto himself, or where it was coming from. But I saw him walking away, I just felt this sense of sadness for him, because to live the rest of your life that way, to have that much anger, I couldn't do that.
And I might say, again, this is, putting on that other hat.
Put on your
Put on that other hat. Yeah, that right now, he's stuck in that one stage. I think of, family members who are kind of stuck in that same place, the anger and the rage. My grandchildren, who are, 8 and siblings, listening to them, them talk, or watching things that they post on, their social media pages. And, I'm sitting here, sometimes the anger is so prevalent that it's almost palpable. It's like, oh my gosh.
Well, it's still really raw. And two, you're only coming up on the 2nd anniversary.
Well, and I think the other thing too with it is his siblings, and I don't want to speak for them, and I hope, to invite them on, one day.
Oh, definitely.
So I don't want to speak for them, but I think what I process in talking to them, it is an issue of why didn't he talk to us? He's so stupid, and I've heard his sister, verbally say, I hate him. But I also, but I know this is coming from a place of pain.
Right.
As the oldest sibling, with her mom, they have an older sister. The oldest in that family. I should have been able to do something. Why didn't he talk to me? My job was, and I'm not sure if this is all that she's feeling, but I should have.
That's natural. We all do that. I do that. And I think some of it too, it still even stems back to the stigma about suicide.
Yes.
Because for a parent, naturally they feel their job is to protect their children. And this one instance they couldn't.
Okay.
For me, it's like, and it goes again back to the stigma. My husband and I were together for nearly 30 years. I didn't see this. And if I couldn't stop it that day, But then too, after the fact, I found out there were other circumstances that if I would have known, even my actions that day may have been different. But then too, it may have stopped it that day.
It would not have stopped
but
it.
It wouldn't have.
Right. If it was inevitable, like if that was his plan, and again, I talked about, doing trainings, on, to, staff members, back when I was in Kansas, working in the prison system. And, the training that I did with the uniform and non-uniform staff, and talking about, or the focus was on, rape survivors, but, understanding that sometimes, it's in the wake of the Prison Rape Elimination Act, but having someone who goes from this trauma and the trauma taking them to a place of, of suicide, it is, all right, so now let's talk about, suicide and, suicide prevention and how do you process, that. And in, making sure that they understood that, the suicide was that person's choice. Yes, we can go through all of the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, if I would have done something to, I hear you say it about, if I would not have gone and run that errand,
Right.
I would have been home. I can say something, I have not gone on a plane to go to New Jersey. Would Patrick still be here? If Devin had not gone to my daughter's for the weekend, would Patrick, he'd be home with his dad and not,
Right.
spending the weekend with his aunt and his cousins.
It's just naturally what we do go
It
through
is,
as
but it's
human.
important, right? But it's important for not only us. I mean, as you say, we process it on this, side of our brain, figuratively, not
Right.
literally. But then the other side of our brain is like, but,
Right, right.
but. And, so I think it's important for folks to realize that, your feelings are normal. Your feelings are natural. Let them happen. But at the same time, acknowledge that suicide, that death, was not your fault. There may not have been anything that you could have done to prevent that. What you have to work on now is you and how do you process
Right.
through this loss. And I think, finding meaning is, a remarkable way to, to do it. Like I said, us with this show.
Well, and I had mentioned, I don't remember which episode, there was a young boy, 12 years old at the beginning of the coronavirus who had taken his life. His name was Hayden, I believe. And his parents started Hayden's Corner. And really sadly, I was going to write it down, but I forgot. Just over the holidays, I mean, just what I have heard, 2 overdoses, 2 deaths by suicide. One of them was, I think it was a Maryland senator. His family, they lost their 25-year-old son Tommy to depression, and they're moving forward even as soon as his death was just a week ago, per se. He had a passion for helping the disadvantaged and animals. He was actually a student at Harvard, and they're carrying on his passion. And I never thought I would be doing something like this. Ever. But and most of our family is okay with it. Some people are very quiet about it, but everybody deals with it differently. And but we want to be here to help you guys too. This isn't something that's going to come to an end anytime soon. It would be nice if it did, but it's not. We have an awesome producer in John and WeBeam TV to help us bring this show to you guys. It's not an easy show for people to watch a lot of the times. I'm sure that you really have to sit down and really, at times, push yourself to stay put and to listen. And we totally understand that, but we want to continue to do this. We've partnered with Kindness to help raise some money so we can get some funding so that we can continue to do this. So we hope that you can click on, or I guess you take a picture of that QR on the bottom of the screen, and it should take you right to the donation website. You can also get to it from the Bobby White Foundation Facebook page. But that's we want to be here to continue to do this. You're going to go through the next year different processes with us that when we come upon days and anniversaries of the deaths of our loved ones, and times it's going to be pretty raw. But this is what we feel needs to happen so that we can reduce the stigma of suicide.
Yes, this is one of our ways of, finding meaning. We all find our meaning in, our own different and respective ways. Some of, times it's a collaborative effort. And I'm thrilled to co-host this with you. Honored to be here. But yeah, like Tammy said, if you are able to donate, or if you know of sponsors that would allow us to keep this going, please let us, think about us, when you do this. I mean, this, I found, I remember, I just realized, at the beginning of the show, we never did introductions, s- got ready to meat and potatoes today. But this has
we
been,
did we?
It is. I mean, this has been, hope in the light of suicide. I am Bonnie Snyder,
And I'm Tammy White, the founder of the Bobby White Foundation, and your host. And we've that was really kind of weird. We did, didn't we? Hey, it's a new year, and we want you all to just remember there's always hope. And
new year, no direction.
New year, new direction.